Welcome to Robert Pears Photography. This is Robert Pears. I want to talk about lens choice, one of the most common questions that I am asked. And, whenever we turn up to a photo shoot, a wedding, or a special event, we bring with us a series of lenses based on that specific event. So I wanted to go through the various lenses, explain some terms, and just help you in making a decision what is the right lens for you. We are a Canon photographer, so in a sense we use all Canon cameras, and so therefore the lens information that I'm talking about is all based on Canon, but you can apply a lot of the information here to other types of lenses as well. With Canon, the lenses fall into three groups: EFS, EF, and the L lenses. So what do those lens types mean? Well, the EFS lens is suitable only for the Rebel series, the XOD, for example, the 60D, and the 7D series can use them. The next is the EF series, which all the cameras can use, and then the top of the line for Canon is their L lenses. But across the range for all cameras, lenses break into several different groups, and we're going to look at those. We're going to talk a little bit of prime, wide angle, zoom, telephoto, tilt shift, specialty, and just explain various terms and what that means. So let's start with prime lenses, and prime lenses have a fixed focal length. Years ago, whenever you bought a 35mm camera, you'd always get a 50mm lens with it. And so we'll refer to the 35mm as a standard. That'll be our reference point. So when we are using an 85mm lens, you have to consider the different camera types. And with DSLRs, there is often a correction because of the size of the sensor. There are full frames, which basically are equivalent to the old 35mm, or they may have a correction, and that's important when you're looking at the focal length of that lens. So one of the things that we use when we're doing portrait work is an 85mm f1.4, so it gives us a real nice ability to blur photographs, and 85mm is a good number to get enough of the picture with not too much background. Now, if I take equivalency, and we're looking at it compared to 35mm, so if I was to use a 50mm and take a 1.3 correction factor, it is now a 65mm. Again, I'll bring this up a little bit more later, so just something to be aware of these correction factors. So a prime lens has a fixed focal length. Talk a little more about these. I use several fixed focal lengths. What's nice about them is the fact that they're usually fast lenses, and we'll get more into that, and they are usually less complex, and there's less issues such as aberrations and stuff like that with them. I have a 100mm macro lens that I use, and as I said, I have an 85mm portrait lens that I generally carry with me. I'm going to talk a little more about macro photography on the next slide. Macro photography is the photography of looking really close, getting in close to a subject, and there are certain things to be aware of when you're doing that. Number one, you need a macro lens. That is a lens that has the ability to go in real close, but you're going to have a very shallow depth of field, and if you're not aware of depth of field, we did a study on that, and I encourage you to go look at that. But basically what it means, there's only a small zone that is acceptably in focus. And also you'll find that lighting can be an issue, so something to be aware of. You can get ring lights that are specifically designed for macro work. If you're using flash, you really have to make sure you got a balance of flash to get correct lighting. Certain zoom lenses will allow you to do macro work as well. They're not going to get as tight as a specifically designed macro lens, but they can get some very nice close shoots. I've mentioned this term already, fast lens. What does it mean? Well, a fast lens is a lens with a very large aperture. If you're not aware of aperture, again, we did a lesson on that. I encourage you to go back and look at it. But a large aperture means it gets a lot of light in it and therefore has a very small f-stop number. Typically, f2.8 or lower f-stops would be considered a fast lens. However, if you're looking at a super telephoto lens or a super zoom lens, then an f-stop of 4 or less may be considered a fast lens. Fast lenses typically cost more. They're usually using higher quality lenses. And if you think about these telephoto lenses that are much bigger lenses, there's a lot of glass involved. With every piece of glass, less light gets through, and therefore to get an f2.8, there's a lot more involved, and it costs a lot more. Fast lenses obviously enable us to do certain things such as be handheld, and they allow us to do things in low light. 2.8 in low light situations becomes invaluable, particularly in sporting events where you can't use flash. Extension tubes. You can add extension tubes on to a macro lens and it will allow you to get in closer. Every lens has a minimum focus distance, and that allows you how close you can get to the subject. Adding an extension tube allows you to get even closer to the subject and again get different perspectives on macro photography. Zoom lenses have a focal length that can be varied. Prime lenses are typically faster than zoom lenses. Zoom lenses obviously give you flexibility because they allow you to play around with that focal length without having to change lenses. That can be critical, for example, when we're doing weddings or specialty events where we don't be changing lenses every couple of minutes, but having a zoom lens where I can move in and out with a focal length can be great. Often hand-holding zoom lenses can be an issue because they are slower lenses. They're often bigger lenses, so you may need a monopod or a tripod to support them. Because they contain more glass and complexity, they are often subject to various aberrations, and that's something we talk about in the lesson. We talk about chromatic aberrations where you get fringing and stuff like that occurring. I said zoom lenses offer a lot of flexibility, but often have a higher f-stop, so something to be aware of. The zoom lenses that I like to carry around, particularly to a wedding or a special event, are the 70 to 200 millimeter L f2.8 with the ultrasonic motor, and it's the second generation of it. That's one of my all-time favorite lenses, very sharp and a wonderful lens. I also carry the 24 to 40 millimeter to get pretty wide. 40 to 70 is a standard lens for me, as is the 14 to 135. And I will often carry, not just for sports, but definitely for sports if I'm outside and it's bright, the 100 to 400. If I'm doing weddings and I want to get quite a distance, I will use the 100 to 400 just to get a nice zoom. Standard lenses are usually supplied with a DSLR. I mean, back years ago when you bought a camera, you would get a 50 millimeter standard lens. Today, most standard lenses, for example, the one that I would use would be a 24 millimeter to 70, or the 40 millimeter to 70, or the 24 to 135, and they go across a broad range of focal lengths that you would typically use for portraits, for landscapes, and they just give a good general lens that covers quite a wide range of applications. Again, as you're looking at lenses, beware of that correction factor, and that you need to multiply that focal length by that correction factor of your camera. Wide angle, well, as the name suggests, it gives you a wide viewing angle. They're able to actually capture a lot of time more than the physical eye can see. They have a very short focal length. A super wide angle is something less than 24 millimeters, and a standard wide angle is less than 50 millimeters. They have a wide depth of field, so you have less need to refocus. With a full frame camera, you can really get the full value of this and get an incredibly wide photograph. However, there is issues with them. If I've noticed outside with a full frame camera, If you shoot below an f-stop of f8, you will start to see vignetting on the side. Secondly, you will begin to see, if you're shooting at the very widest angle, so say 24 or less, buildings start to curve inwards at the edge. You get this bending. Wide angles can capture truly unique photos, and I love them. There are other issues I should mention. The fact that anything closer will appear bigger. But again, it gives you the ability to really go in close to a subject and yet get a lot of the background. I love to use them in the dance of a reception and a wedding, stuff like that. Just a great lens to have with you. And again, for portraits, you can get some very unique perspectives where you can go in close, yet get a lot of the background, but have the person, standing out bigger because they're closest. Tilt shift, I bring this and I put this out of sync, but I'm putting here because tilt shift is a wide angle lens that has the ability to change the focal plane, so you can correct what I told you occurs in a wide angle lens where you see the curving of buildings. So if you're trying to take architecture photographs or landscape of a city, with the wide angle, the buildings at the edges begin to curve. Even if it was just a regular landscape, you'll see the curving. With the tilt shift, you can correct that. Well, I'm going to stop here and encourage you to come back and listen to part 2.